Hello everyone, I am glad to finally reintroduce you all to the show's status report. This is where I talk about ongoing playthroughs and give my like thoughts on the game and more in-depth thoughts on what I feel about the game and stuff like that. Today's status report episode is about Persona 5, which I am currently less playing on the channel. As of speaking, I am about to send the calling card for the fourth palace in the game, which is the Futuba world. If you haven't played Persona 5, I recommend it. That is like my short and very is I recommend it. I recommend it if you are able to look past the very dark theming there is in this game, because the game is full of like references to suicide, references to slavery, references to uh, sexual assault, sexual slavery as well, abuse, physical abuse, pedophilia, um, blackmailing, all sorts of really dark themes. So if you are, I don't want to say skittish, but I want to say kind of, if you kind of don't enjoy these sorts of stories, don't have a good time with these sorts of stories, for the most part stay away from Persona 5, because they kind of throw around these kinds of stuff around a lot. Like that this is of course up to a point, because that's actually one of my major thoughts about the game, is that while I kind of admire that they want to tackle these sorts of themes, the game is kind of held back by its gameplay in that regard. Like, usually when you enter a palace, the palace will be themed around what the subject of that target is. Like, the first target of the game is a pedophile, and not a pedophile, but he clearly is sexually interested in younger girls, like teenagers. So I guess the term is agorophile. I still just call it a pedophile. Um, and he's like, he physically abuses people, and he sees himself as the king of a castle. Hence, his world is a castle, and he is the king. And like, there's a lot of sexual themes around it. Like, all the enemies in the game are succubuses and or is it succubi? It's probably succubi and incubi, and other references to that kind of stuff. Um, a problem is, like, while handling these sorts of themes can be interesting in a video game, the game is held back by it also being like a shonen anime kind of feel. Like, one of the main characters of the game is a cute little cat who runs around, is funny, even though this cat has a really dark backstory, as far as I can see. Like, it just kind of takes away from it that you're going through a theme that is really dark. Like, especially the theme I'm going for right now is Survivor's Guild, which I have, to a much lesser degree, gone through myself. The guilt that follows after someone close to you dies, especially if they commit suicide, is really tough to deal with, and some people never manage to deal with it. And of course, that is the theme around the fourth palace. This is a person who has become a hikikomori, shut in because of not being able to deal with these feelings of survivor's guilt. And that is a really dark story. It's actually a really sad story. I kind of teared up during one of the cutscenes when the big reveal came. But then you go back into the gameplay and you're doing role playing fantasy thing, fighting funny looking characters and being a funny looking character yourself, and yeah, and then you go back to the daytime aspect, and you go watch a movie with one of your friends and stuff like that, and like it kind of takes away from what the chapter of that thing, like the theme of that chapter of the game is about. Um, and especially when deciding to handle these kinds of themes, it kind of makes it seem like the game is unintentionally, albeit unintentionally, belittling them. Like, they're kind of commodifying Survivor's Guild, um, and commodifying suicide, commodifying blackmail and sexual slavery, um, and that is really is such a huge shame, because beyond that, it is such a good game. Like the gameplay itself has managed to sell me on Japanese role playing games again. I am a person who has never really gotten into Japanese role playing games, especially turn based video games. I'm a big Civilization fan, but in a lot of Japanese role playing games, like Final Fantasy or something like that, I feel like I'm hitting my head against a wall, because oftentimes the game will expect you to farm. I don't like farming. I don't like farming in any game. I don't like just going through the same mundane task just to see the next chapter of the story. I don't like the story being held hostage by you not walking around in circles enough and doing the same random encounter over and over again. Um, because you don't meet, usually in games like these, you don't meet that big variety of enemies. Um, so like what Persona does is, like, it gives you the option of going back to the real world and leveling up there. It gives you the option of going to Mementos and leveling up there, and still feel like, because they have those tasks in Mementos, you still feel like you're doing something meaningful when you go through the quote unquote grinding or farming element of the game. Um, and that, I think they do really well. They make it feel like I'm not just hitting my head against the wall. I'm not running around in Midgard in circles in Final Fantasy VII, waiting to have enough, have done enough random encounters to be able to beat the next guy. I'm not playing Pokemon running around in the high, tall grass in circles. As a kid, I played Pokemon Yellow all the way through once. Um, and uh, there's a lot of just, at least in those early Pokemon games, because there's no XP share, there's a lot of just going in circles and leveling up your team in the tall grass. And Persona has done away with that. At least Persona 5. I have not played the previous Persona games, so I like that you get the option of being stealthy. You get the option of just going through and doing every encounter, or sneaking past and going through with the story. I am slightly underleveled in the game, but I am still able to progress in the story, and I think that's really meaningful. Also, the personas themselves also give me an advantage with. There is the sort of Pokemon elemental, like this one is strong to this element, this one is weak to that element. and you can level up the personas without necessarily having to level up your main characters, and without necessarily having to go through all those extra things, all the grinding. Like, you don't have to do every encounter in a world to beat it, you know. Um, so that aspect is really good to me. In fact, it might be one of the best gameplay wise. It might be one of the best RPGs actually I've played. Just because it gives that variety, it gives that extra. It lets you have a different play style than just beating your head against the same wall over and over again until you break through it. Like in a lot of these games, like I'll get to a certain point, I'll always get to one boss that I just cannot get past, and then I'll quit the game. And Persona so far has not done that. And in the real world, like the real world is not superfluous. You get the way you strengthen your relations with people, it gives you advantages beyond just making the character stronger. It also gives you other like strategic advantages, or gives you store credit or stuff like that, which I'm also kind of missing in BioWare. Like romancing a character, usually in BioWare, that means you get some sort of bonus from that. Like Isabella will get a new costume, and she will get some sort of damage bonus, for example, in Dragon Age 2. But you don't have any advantage to speaking a lot to Bodan, or you don't have any advantage to speaking a lot with your uncle. Not finishing their side stories, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. Not in the greater whole. Of course, it has a little bit of a story advantage, like it will be brought up later. Characters will react differently to you, but you don't get little combat bonuses. You don't get stuff like, imagine if befriending Bodan would get you a credit because I remember in Dragon Age Origins, Bodan talks about like, can we stay at your camp? You will get a store credit, and you agree. I think the only thing you can do is agree, and you will get what they call a credit. But if you've never tried their store without the credit, how do you know you're getting a credit? Like, it doesn't feel like you're getting a credit at Bodan and Sandal's store in Dragon Age Origins. That is not the case in Persona 5, and I'm sorry for trailing off like that, but that's not the case in Persona 5. Befriending the doctor gives you new items at the doctor, gives you a credit at her store. Befriending the gun merchant gives you new abilities, gives you new functions. It's so much more interesting to do it like that, and I really wish BioWare would pick this aspect up, like having to actually live in the world, having to actually do your homework, and interact with humanity beyond just playing the fantasy aspect of it is really interesting to me. That's probably the greatest hook in me right now, is going through the daily life things, going to speak with the public speaker and learning negotiation tactics that I can use in the combat system. Going to talk to the shogi player and learning strategy stuff that gives me new abilities during combat is so valuable and so interesting, and the stories for each character is so interesting. It seems like I'm just heaping praise on this game, but I will still say, again, with the theming, like, all that aside, the gameplay kind of takes away from the game itself, and there are definitely, like, it hasn't been as bad in the other chapters, but definitely during this fourth chapter of the game, I would really have liked this story to have been in a in a in a visual novel instead. Um, I'm told the animated series isn't very good, which is a big shame because I feel like focusing on the story of this chapter could have been amazing. Um, then again, there's a lot of setup for it. There's this very personal story also because it involves one of the side characters a lot, which you have created a relationship through the entire game. So now you're helping him as well. Um, of course, like the game will probably. I'm about to go up to the boss battle in this chapter, and this story will probably come to a head now. So that's going to be really interesting, and I look forward to playing more. I hope you enjoyed this little rant of mine. It's not really scripted, as you can tell, but I thought I would give people like more insight into my thoughts of the game that I can give during a live stream, where I'll also have to pay attention to the game. So if you enjoyed this, please like the video. Consider coming to one of my live streams. I'll usually do them like in the evenings. I try to do, like, for me that's like 5 p.m. GMT +1, meaning Scandinavian time. I'm in Denmark, but consider coming to my live streams. Consider watching some of the stuff, and hopefully I will get back to doing more of these status reports. I think I've only done one in the past. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you join me next time for more shenanigans. This has been Ankford. Thank you for listening.